Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 21 of my Eyes on Eurasia podcast with Glen Howard. Well, superpower summits are back in fashion again as President Trump met last Friday in Anchorage, Alaska with Russian leader Vladimir Putin. Yesterday, President Trump met at the White House with 7 European leaders, including the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. And after that meeting, he met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Now it appears a new trilateral summit between President Trump, Comrade Putin, and Zelensky is on the horizon, and we may see a three-way meeting in the coming weeks. Helping us to make sense of what is happening in U.S.-Russia relations is none other than Andrei Illarionov, a former presidential advisor to President Vladimir Putin, who advised him on the Russian economy, and Andrei is a well-known former Kremlin insider. Andrei is currently a senior fellow with the Center for Security Policy and a frequent commentator on current developments inside of Russia. He's also been a regular contributor to my podcast, making his third appearance, and today he's willing to offer his valuable perspective and insights on the inner workings of Russian policy towards Ukraine and the United States. In this post-summit Eyes on Eurasia podcast special edition, Andrei will be sharing his impressions about the Alaska summit, the recent meetings in Washington, and what we can anticipate in the weeks ahead as the guns of August may fall silent, and discussion will focus on a ceasefire moving to a peace agreement, or we may just have a peace agreement without a ceasefire. I don't know, but all of this is highly unorthodox method of U.S. diplomacy. Anyway, Andrei, welcome back. Tell us what you think about the Alaska summit and all this pageantry that occurred, and share a few moments of kind of providing your perspective on the summit, the red carpet, the B-2 bombers flying overhead, and Putin's ride in the beast with President Trump. So, Andrei, what do you think? What were your thoughts about the summit last Friday?
Glenn, thank you very much for inviting me. It's always a pleasure. An honor to discuss with you the most urgent and interesting events of the today. So let's start with Alaska Summit, and just to give my personal feeling and personal assessment, what was that? It was an attempt to replay Munich 1938. It was an attempt that turned out to be not as it was finished back then in 1938. So it was an attempt, but it did not happen exactly as it was back then. So, and that is why we need to see why I see it as another attempt of Munich 1938, and why it did not yet develop as it was before the Second World War. So you already started to talk about this red carpet, about this kind of military parade in the air, greeting military criminal and international terrorist Mr. Putin on the American soil, on the territory of the United States, while there is a universal recognition of the crimes committed by this person personally and with his troops in Ukraine, Georgia, Syria, and many other places. So this is, as you said, is very unorthodox approach of the current U.S. administration towards this notorious military war criminal. So that is why what has been given to him, in addition to what has been given by President Trump to Putin in previous 7 months during the second term of Mr. Trump presidency, is without any comparison. So, but looks like the kindness of Mr. Trump does not have borders. He continued to please and greet Mr. Putin. So certainly this entourage is shocking. That's exactly what Putin wanted from Western leaders, and especially from the US president for a long time. He was calling for recognition, legitimization, for meetings, for summits, for photo opportunities, and he got all of that by sacrificing nothing. So for 7 months, we saw and we heard that Mr. Trump tried to put some conditions for meeting with Mr. Putin. He wanted ceasefire. He was talking about the possibility to stop the war within 24 hours, 53 times, according to calculations made by American journalists. After that, four times he was giving about 2 weeks to Mr. President to finish the war. After that, Mr. Trump gave 50 days ultimatum. After that, he gave 10 to 12 days ultimatum. After that, he gave 8 of August, the last day, after which some sanctions from the hell would fall on Russia, and so on and so on. Mr. Trump himself proposed several times ideas about possible ceasefire, either overall ceasefire or ceasefire in the sea, ceasefire in the air, ceasefire against attacks on energy infrastructure. All those conditions that were proposed by Mr. Trump over the last 7 months, even longer, all of them without exception have been abandoned, forgot. And Mr. Putin received what he has received in Alaska, in Anchorage, without sacrificing even a negligible step towards, first of all, not only even to Ukraine, not to Europe, but even to the United States, even to personally Mr. Trump. So Mr. Trump gave so many gifts, so many
Let me interrupt
presents
real briefly,
to
Andrei.
to Mr. Putin. Nevertheless, looks like his kindness once again does not have borders.
Let me interrupt you. You were alluding to the fact that Trump had reduced his ultimatum on sanctions from 50 days to 10 days, and then with that time frame ending, we had Mr. Witkoff go to Moscow. Now, President Trump said that was at the request of President Putin, and that was why he dispatched Witkoff to Moscow. Do you think that this fear of sanctions, of what Trump was threatening, led to that change in the position to ask that Witkoff come to Moscow? And do you think that maybe it's possible, as some people have said, that Putin in that private meeting said something, gave a signal to Witkoff that they had not seen before, that caused the Trump administration to make that golden overture to come to Alaska? What do you think? What's your impression?
I don't see any sign, any demonstration that this ultimatum for introduction of secondary sanctions against India or China or anybody else would affect Mr. Putin's decision. Just not a single one. But this is a real fact that all of a sudden, Mr. Witkoff rushed to Moscow on August 6th, 2 days before this date, August 8th. So the question is why? Why Mr. Witkoff all of a sudden went to Moscow and not and Mr. Trump did do nothing with his threat of sanctions, because neither on August 8th nor later, now it's already almost couple of weeks since then, Mr. Trump is not talking about sanctions at all. So it means something happened. Maybe it was an original plan not to do anything about that, but maybe something happened. And I am thinking about what might that happen. And it looks like on August 4th, couple of days before, Russian Foreign Ministry announced that Russia is not longer bound by the limitation of this treaty for intercontinental missiles. So before that, Mr. Putin traveled to Arkhangelsk, to the industrial plant Sevmash, where they launched a new nuclear submarine. After that, Mr. Lukashenko said that new missile, intercontinental ballistic missile, ICBM Oreshnik will be deployed on the Belarusian territory before the end of this year. After that, Mr. Kim from North Korea said that he's interested in deploying such type of missiles on the North Korean territory without any conditions. Maybe I missed something else. But looks like that Mr. Putin was playing with nuclear/missile cards quite effectively. And maybe that game and that play that being launched and continued by Putin attracted attention of Mr. Trump, and he was interested, or maybe even forced, to send his envoy to Moscow to find out what is going on and what is the real situation with nuclear missile topic. Moreover, as we all remember, there was a very unusual, as you would say, unorthodox exchange of tweets between President Trump and the former Russian president, now TikToker Dmitry Medvedev. And Mr. Medvedev, unlike his many other tweets executed in a very particular vulgar way, all of a sudden became rather serious and hinted several times to President Trump about the terms of the treaty, SALT III treaty, that is going to be ended February 2026. And we still did not hear anything from either Mr. Trump or Trump administration what is going to happen with the fate of this treaty. So that is why my suspicion...
And what treaty are you referring to for our listeners who aren't familiar with it?
SALT 3.
That expires when?
February 26. So it's
Next
about
year.
6 months. 6 months before that. Okay, as we remember, in year 2019, during the first Trump term, Mr. Trump said that it's not a good treaty for the United States, and he's not interested in prolongation of this treaty. When Mr. Biden became US president, he immediately called Putin, and they signed a prolongation of this treaty for 5 more years in late January, early February 21. So now for 5 more years. Now these 5 more years are expiring on February 26. And now the moment of truth. Either President Trump continues his policy and approach that he was talking about back then during his first term, and that is why he's not interested to prolong this treaty. That is why it would expire. Or if he's interested to do something, he would be forced to engage Mr. Putin in launching negotiations about this particular treaty. So far, we have not heard any particular comments from the current administration. Certainly, we don't know much yet about the real status and the real situation with the nuclear arsenals of both nuclear superpowers. And that is why we are not sure about the real situation. But looks like that Mr. Putin feels quite emboldened, and quite energetic, and quite convinced that he's in a very strong position right now. And the tone and style of Medvedev's tweets somehow inadvertently confirmed that. Whether it has some relations to the Alaska summit or not, it's still a topic to be discussed and to follow. But my feeling is that somehow it is related. And the reaction, the response that Trump gave to Putin for so much wanted by Putin, the summit, it might be related to something that Putin passed via probably Mr. Vitkov to Mr. Trump. And that is why the whole discussion about sanctions, about all ultimatums, about this terms 2 weeks or 50 days, or about 2 nuclear submarines that Mr. Trump sent to some areas of the world ocean close to the Russian territory. All of these have been forgotten.
Well, let me interrupt you. You know, there's been these discussions that Witkoff misunderstood what Putin said, and then they got into these meetings in Alaska, and then the discussion in Alaska was not what Witkoff had thought that he had heard in Moscow, and that is that Putin was willing to make territorial concessions other than Kharkiv and Sumy, those two areas, and that in fact that Putin wasn't willing to make concessions on pulling out of Zaporozhye or Kherson or any other areas, and in fact he stuck to his demands that they get all of Donetsk back. And do you think that in light of that maybe Witkoff maybe didn't understand something when he was communicating with and talking to Putin? Because this seems to me have been, if Witkoff had not heard something, what he thought he had heard, that could have been the whole rationale why suddenly he went back to Washington and told President Trump, said, oh my God, the Russians are, Putin's willing to give back territory. Let's go ahead and have our long-awaited summit. I mean, do you think that there could have been some miscommunication in what he heard?
Here we're in a very shaky ground because we don't have the first source information. There are also some leaks, misunderstanding. The level of understanding of Mr. Witkoff is far from necessary for anyone who is involved in such type of negotiations. It's not the first time. That is why it's not a surprise. But a part of Mr. Witkoff, there should be some institutions of foreign policy apparatus on the American side that would check, confirm, and try to understand what was the message from the Russian side. I don't think it's would be quite productive to that we would discuss the whatever land swaps or territory or the border or the line of contact and so on, because there is no official documents, and certainly whatever Mr. Witkoff says publicly, it's not a source of reliable information.
Andrei, what I'm alluding to is that this was such a huge change in position by the Trump administration. From 10 days, 50 days sanctions, 10 days, the ultimatums against India, and then Witkoff goes to Moscow, and soon, boom, we're having a summit in Alaska. I mean, everybody was like, what? Is shaking their heads. They can't, in disbelief at the huge change in position by the Trump administration. I guess that's what I'm alluding to, is that there was such a reversal position that it was stunning for those that are following it. Now, a lot of people out there are critical of President Trump and believe that he has always wanted this all along. So I'll take that view into perspective. But going forward, it really seems like it was a huge change in position, and then also going from ceasefire demands to now a peace agreement. So let's move this up a little bit to talk about the meeting that occurred yesterday in Washington. And you had some thoughts on that, and where we have the leaders, and you have 6 European leaders, including the Secretary General of NATO participating in the meeting. And so we had that, and now there's discussion of a trilateral summit that's going to be discussed. So we got a lot of things going on, and I really want to ask you to talk about each of these 4 topics that you accurately pinpointed as really revolving around the summit and ongoing talks. And so these were in order: security guarantees, number 1; land swaps, 2; overall settlement versus ceasefire, 3; and then number 4, the trilateral summit between Trump, Putin, and Zelensky, which the Kremlin apparently agreed to yesterday, after Trump called Putin during his meeting with the representatives of the European Union and the other European leaders. So these are the 4 issues you pointed out. And can you kind of go over those, starting with the security guarantees, but also can you confirm, what did the Kremlin say? Did Putin actually agree to this trilateral summit?
Oh, that's exactly my point. Would be one of the first points would be, it has been said only by Mr. Trump. Neither Putin nor Lavrov nor anybody from the Russian side ever confirmed readiness for either trilateral summit or bilateral summit between Putin and Zelensky. Even, as we've heard yesterday, Mr. Trump said that after his conversation with Putin, he got agreement from Putin to have this bilateral summit with Zelensky. But we did not hear confirmation from the Kremlin side.
So as of today, Tuesday, you look at the Russian media very closely. There's been no confirmation of that.
We have a comments of Mr. Ushakov, who is a assistant to Putin on foreign policy issues, and the formulation is a very different one. According to Ushakov, two leaders, meaning Putin and Trump, agreed on thinking of potentially raising the level of representation in the bilateral negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. Certainly, this particular formula with very big desire can be interpreted as a potential raising up to the leaders, up to the presidents. Yes, it is still a possibility. But such a formulation as it has been presented gives a lot of room for Putin to downplay the state and to say, okay, instead of Medinsky, who is advisor to Putin, this new delegation might be headed by the deputy minister of foreign affairs. That would be some kind of, to some extent, maybe raising the level, or by minister like Lavrov, or by the deputy prime minister, or by the prime minister before going to Putin himself. So there is several levels, several steps that this level can be raised. So that is why there is no confirmation what President Trump said yesterday, but there's still a lot of room on the Putin side, and we don't have a confirmation neither for the first bilateral summit, nor even for trilateral summit. There is no confirmation. Just a couple of days before, Kremlin informed that there is no discussion yet about any trilateral summit. So that is why we have a quite clear disparity between what Trump says and what Kremlin says. So that is why we would be rather cautious to make any conclusion that any agreement has been achieved.
Now, going back to the 4 points, the security guarantees, land swaps, overall settlement versus ceasefire. Now, these are the 4 points that you talked about. You talked about the trilateral summit. Now the debate after the meetings yesterday, there's discussion about security guarantees. We have President Trump today stating that there will be no American boots on the ground in Ukraine. But we did have discussion about security guarantees or NATO style type of guarantee. And everybody's asking, well, what does that mean? But what we do know of the known knowns is that the Europeans, meaning Britain and France, have offered to go to send peacekeepers or troops to Ukraine to help provide security. And we do know that today the Kremlin said there would be no Europeans involved in any type of peacekeeping or security guarantee. And that contradicts what President Trump was indicating yesterday. But President Trump has all along has wanted the Europeans to be peacekeepers, but the debate inside the United States was on that role was whether the United States would provide some type of military support for the peacekeepers in the event of a peace agreement. And that could mean anything. It could mean air support, which the peacekeepers would need. And that's a key question. I think we're going to go back to that discussion about what it is that a guarantee is. And President Trump today very much excluded the role of Americans on the ground. Okay, that's a fair point. Now we're back to the issue of what Europeans may be involved, but the Kremlin says there won't be any. So are all these things kind of on security guarantees? Is this part of what we call in Oklahoma horse swapping? I mean, is this prior to this meeting? They're now going back and forth trying to agree to disagree?
First of all, I would attract attention to the fact of changing language. Prior yesterday meeting, there was a statement from Europeans and from Giorgia Meloni in which they were greeting that they were happy that the United States is participating in Article 5 type security guarantees for Ukraine. This is the language of the joint statement of European leaders, I believe, a couple of days ago. When we heard Donald Trump yesterday from the Oval Room or from the White House, he was talking not about participation, he was talking about coordination from the United States. What we heard today from President Trump interview on Fox, this is a very different language. United States would not participate in any security guarantees. This is a business of Europeans. So that is why just within very few days, we have a very different interpretation from the American side about the role of the United States in those security guarantees. This is the first point. Second point, participation of European peacekeepers in Ukraine, British, French, and so on. First of all, it is not confirmed yet. There is a discussion about that goes for a number of months, but there is no clear confirmation or obligations taken by British or French government that they would be sending those peacekeepers in Ukraine. Third point, even if British and French government would send peacekeepers to Ukraine, it is not Article 5 type guarantees, security guarantees for Ukraine. Because Article 5 of the Washington Treaty about on creation of NATO is a different one. It is about the collective defense against aggressor. Certainly, if we look into the language of the treaty, it's true. It's up to each nation to decide which particular way each country, each nation decides how to participate in collective defense. Nevertheless, it is being regularly discussed at NATO summits and at NATO meetings that in case of real aggression against any of members of NATO, the response would be a military one. And in those rare cases when NATO took such a decision, like after 9/11, there was a military response to those who have been considered as aggressor, not only by the United States, but the US allies. So that is why if we look in security guarantees, Article 5 type, or any security guarantees that we know from history, like security guarantees that have been provided by France and Germany and Britain to Poland before the Second World War, and they used these legal obligations on September 3rd, 1939, after Germany attacked Poland, to enter the war on the side of Poland. So that is why security guarantees, as we have seen from the old experience of 1939 or relatively recent experience of year 2001, is the case when the members of the military alliance are taking decisions to enter the war, to enter not peacekeeping operations, but military operations. So that is why it's the only way how to interpret security guarantees first, and especially Article 5 type security guarantees. So that is why even what we are talking or have been proposed like a peacekeepers operation, it's not Article 5 security guarantees. So that is why your question that you raised earlier on, what does it mean? When they're talking about security guarantees, what exactly do they have in mind? Whether President Trump, when he promised, according to the number of statements, including from Mr. Vitkov, that, okay, so United States is ready to provide Ukraine Article 5 type security guarantees, does it mean that President Trump is ready to enter the war with aggressor against Ukraine? Or Prime Minister Starmer or President Macron or anybody else. So this is a crucial question. So far, we did not get any reasonable or any acceptable answer. But having said so, nevertheless, I would put kind of slightly out of 99% negative comments, I would put 1% positive comment, because the very fact that discussion shifted to discussion of security guarantees for Ukraine is a undoubtedly positive sign. Because before that, from February 28th, 2025 visit Mr. Zelensky to the Oval Office, security guarantees for Ukraine were taboo for Mr. Trump, for U.S. administration, and for many others. Now, it looks as it's not taboo anymore. It is being discussed. Certainly, interpretation of those security guarantees is quite different from the orthodox one, but it is being discussed. But now we're coming our old so-called friend, to put it in brackets. So why all of a sudden, even in such a language, we've heard that President Trump is ready either to participate in security guarantees or to coordinate security guarantees or somehow to just to do something about security guarantees with Ukraine. My suspicion.
Let me interrupt you.
I'm trying to answer. Just if you allow me, I just finish this because I think it's important one. Because about the readiness to provide security guarantees to Ukraine, that has been said by Putin at the press conference in Anchorage, and this is a something really extraordinary event. Putin, who always denied not only security guarantees, but the right to exist for Ukraine, for sovereignty, for independence, for statehood of Ukraine, all of a sudden started to talk about the readiness to provide security guarantee for Ukraine. So, having heard Mr. Putin and having read Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia apparatchiks in recent days, I cannot exclude that Mr. Putin told Mr. Trump that he is ready to talk about the so-called security guarantees for Ukraine if those security guarantees for Ukraine first will be provided not only and not so much Europeans but by Russia. And for Mr. Trump, looks like it's not a very big problem. He probably does not pay much attention to such a detail. And second, security guarantees provided to Ukraine should be not alone. It should be mutual security guarantees provided both Ukraine and Russia. And you can ask me what kind of security guarantees are for Russia. That's exactly what Mr. Putin suggested and offered to the United States and NATO back in December 2021 in those two draft treaties. So that is why probably Mr. Putin is trying to renew his proposal to the United States and to the NATO with all those conditions that he put on the table. Okay, I'm ready to do something, at least for the moment, with Ukraine if the United States would withdraw their troops and their military infrastructure from the Central Europe back to so-called 1997 line. That idea seems to be dead from the very beginning. It's not non-starter, but it was a non-starter under previous administration. Maybe Mr. Trump has a different attitude, and looks like it's clearly he has a very different attitude towards his friend Mr. Putin, towards Russia. And maybe Mr. Putin decided to explore this new window of opportunities connected with the new American administration to try to sell security guarantees for Ukraine along with security guarantees for Russia, part of which would be withdrawal of substantial military infrastructure of NATO and the United States from Central Europe.
Well, let me interrupt you there. And the point is that that's a very good what you're talking about is a very interesting observation, because the Trump administration there's been reports in the media that the Trump administration is interested or has been interested in a drawdown of U.S. forces in Europe. And so the story is that those forces, about 20,000 men, were added to U.S. forces in Europe by the Biden administration. So the view is that potentially that, and one of my theories is that when this is being discussed is that, and what you're referring to is kind of a grand bargain over Ukraine, which is everybody's fear. But what I'm thinking is that if they get some type of guarantee or assurances in a peace agreement, conceptually, you could see the Trump administration drawing down those 20,000 forces and 20,000 men to what it was before the Biden increased deployment. So I do think that's somewhere in the back of their minds, and we don't know what is being discussed, what isn't being discussed. And so you're talking a lot about security guarantees, and I'll say one thing. Someone pointed out that the Budapest Memorandum signed in 1996 on Ukraine's willingness to give up its nuclear weapons and nuclear bombers was originally mentioned as a guarantee, and Ambassador Stephen Pfeiffer had indicated in a discussion that the actual agreement was more of an assurance than a guarantee. So what I'm wondering is that this discussion of NATO-style or NATO-like guarantees could evolve into something like an Article 5-like assurance by the United States, which is a huge difference than the term guarantee. But again, I don't know. So I don't know whether this is possible or not. But I think the whole idea, Andrei, of having an agreement before a ceasefire is really kind of highly unorthodox. And that the types of questions you're talking about, and you and I are talking about, guarantees versus assurances, are all part of a stage-by-stage process for a ceasefire moving into an agreement. But now the Trump administration has this process of, well, we want to move to an agreement without a ceasefire, and this is just, it's getting very highly complicated. And then let's throw in, to make it even more complicated, let's talk about the idea of land swaps, which is something you wanted to mention earlier.
So let's do it one by one, and after that make some kind of overall conclusion what we are having with. So first of all, this overall settlement versus ceasefire. It's very clear. There were two approaches. One was European/US/Ukrainian ceasefire first, overall settlement later. Putin's position was overall settlement first, and ceasefire is not necessary. After 4 or 5 months of discussion, Mr. Trump, from the position of US, European, Ukrainian, shifted directly straight to the position of Putin. And now he fully supports Putin's position in this regard. Second point, land swap. Europeans, few days ago, once again published their joint statement about the territorial integrity of Ukraine. President Zelensky not once was talking about that he's not ready to trade with Ukrainian land. The only person who is talking about the land swaps is Mr. Trump. And in this regard, he is fully on Putin's side. He shifted there. Only 1 year ago, during his presidential campaign, Mr. Trump claimed that it was responsibility, guilt of other US presidents, starting from Mr. Obama to Biden, under whom Ukraine lost some parts of territory, Ukraine, Georgia, and some others. Now, Mr. Trump himself is not only offering, but insisting that Ukraine would give parts of own territory to Putin. This is a Putin's position. Trilateral versus four-lateral, because there is no European participants in this trilateral. It is once again movement from common or joint US, European, Ukrainian position towards Putin's position. Finally, security guarantees. the way how Putin interprets security guarantees, that security guarantees for Ukraine must be provided by Russia, how it has been done by Budapest Memorandum, we all remember very well, or maybe in the path to that, in addition to that, there will be mutual security guarantees to Ukraine and Russia as a part of this grand bargain in a style of two draft treaties offered by Putin in December 21. It's once again, it's shift of Trump's position from more or less joint position with Europeans in Ukraine to fully Putin's position. So altogether, in addition to what you were talking from the very beginning about the red carpet meeting by President Trump of Mr. Putin, with all these air parade and with all this entourage in Anchorage, we can see clearly that position of Mr. Trump right now shifted towards Mr. Putin everywhere, according to all directions, without any exception. So that is why not only the claims by experts or observers, this is publicly visible, and especially when President Trump rushed to call President Putin in the midst of the conversation with Europeans and Zelensky, we can see that Mr. Trump fully associated himself and fully allied with President Putin. So this is a very new, in the sense of very clear and very confirmed change in the position of the United States administration, current US administration. So that is why the beginning of this Munich-style summit that we started to talk about, that happened in Anchorage in Alaska, continued yesterday in Washington, and probably will be continued again in the coming days and weeks. And this is probably the most important conclusion from the last two summits.
So do you think that this is going to have, if we move into a grand bargain stage, I mean, do you see this as having a Yalta-like element if Ukraine is asked to make these concessions?
What is the difference of the current situation from the Munich and Yalta? Munich is good because Munich was a decision about the fate of one particular country without asking this country, with asking and consulting with this particular country. Yalta is much larger event because it was a decision about the fate of the whole continent, at least European continent, by the winners in the war. Here, we don't see winners in that war. Just to having something like Yalta would be indirect confirmation that, first of all, Putin won this war, but he would win this war not only against Ukraine. It would be recognition that Putin would won this war against Ukraine, Europe, NATO, and the United States. And this is much more important because it's by far, by definition, it would mean that, first of all, it was collective West was defeated in this war, and as a recognition of this collective West, of this defeat, and as a some kind of the pledge for bargain, for grand bargain to the winner, to the victor, to Putin, please establish new conditions, new rules, new framework for European and to a very high extent world security architecture. I am not sure that a substantial portion of potential participants, first of all from Europe, not talking even about Ukraine, are ready for such a grand bargain. That the attempt to such a bargain to organize, yes, we do see definitely from Putin, and now we have from Trump. But we have some other participants that seems to me are not happy and not ready for such a grand bargain.
that's where I wanted to go was where's Zelensky in this, because I don't see him giving concessions and giving up the fortress belt defensive positions that they have in Donetsk region with Slavyansk, Kramatorsk. They're in very good military positions now, and also the Ukrainian army has been making gains in Pokrovsk, kicking out the Russian units that breached their salient and created a salient there. So, and Zelensky gets a vote in all this, and he's not. I don't think he's militarily in a weak position right now, as contrary to some of the Russian propagandists who are alleging that he is. But domestically, he can't offer something like this. And I think domestically in the United States, Trump cannot be seen as selling out Ukraine. There is an element of, even within Republicans who support Ukraine, and yes, they can support talks in a meeting, but Putin giving up nothing in return is really, I don't think that's plausible in this scenario of the pressure on Zelensky by President Trump. I mean, there's going to be people that are going to push back against Trump, and when people do push back against him in the media about selling out Ukraine, he does show a sensitivity to that. So where do you think Zelensky's going to go in all this?
Zelensky probably learned a hard lesson of coming to Washington and communicating with Trump. So that is why he was forced to change his language, the real language and body language. And we saw it over last months, and especially now in Washington. But does it mean the change of language? Does it mean change of his policy, change of his strategy, change of his stance? I'm not sure. You already mentioned that not only Zelensky, but the Ukrainian society is not ready for giving up land at all, and especially land that has not been occupied by Russian troops, has not been captured, especially with these military fortifications. In this regard, this military fortification of Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, and all those areas, they are very similar to the Czechoslovakian fortification in Sudetenland that have been given to Hitler in Munich in 1938. So that is why Putin is trying to repeat the success of his predecessor, Adolf Hitler, versus Czechoslovakia, trying to use diplomacy or pressure and using some his allies among Western leaders. Back then it was Mr. Chamberlain. Now it looks like Mr. Trump, trying to use their weight and their pressure on this smaller country. Back then was Czechoslovakia, now Ukraine, to get something that he was not able to get with weapons, just to get it with instruments of diplomacy. I hope that Zelensky and the Ukrainian leadership understand it very well, and they are not ready to repeat mistakes of Czechoslovakian leadership.
I would agree with you there, and I think that echoes of Munich are certainly strong enough to counter that. And that's a very good point you made, Andrei. And for those our listeners that are not aware what we're talking about, there's a fortification structure in eastern Ukraine called the Fortress Belt that runs in very advantageous defensive positions for Ukraine, which they have retained and are very strongly dug in those positions to repel Russian forces, which have taken, I don't know what, seven months just to try to take Pokrovsk, a great loss of life. So it would be, for Ukraine to give up those positions in negotiations would be very astounding to me. And our European allies, I think, would very much dig in their heels on this aspect when Putin is not willing to give anything in return. Andrei, you've been a great guest. We have about a couple minutes left. What do you think we should look for in the coming weeks?
I think the crucial point, those 4 points that we were talking about, the security guarantees, this is probably number one, because we need to understand what are they talking about, because I'm absolutely sure that the security guarantee that Mr. Putin is talking about are quite different from security guarantees Article 5 type that Giorgia Meloni was proposing. And we certainly don't have any idea what kind of NATO type or Article 5 security guarantees Mr. Trump is talking about putting inside Mr. Witkov. So that is why I think it's number one, because the crucial point in all this discussion about the potentially stopping this war, as President Zelensky, by the way, was very right, saying on February 28th in the Oval Office when he visited Trump first time, he started to talk about the security guarantees for Ukraine when he was cut off by Trump. So because without understanding what does it mean for Ukraine, it's impossible to make any step forward. Now, the only security guarantee that Ukraine has today is armed forces of Ukraine. Not only armed forces, but big armed forces, about 700,000 to 800,000 people fighting every day on the front of the Russian-Ukrainian war. So that is why, if we're talking about any other security guarantee, it means either in addition to the armed forces of Ukraine fighting 24/7, in addition, meaning some other armed forces of some other countries, and that would be the Article 5 security guarantees. If it is not so, it meaning the cleaning the way for capitulation of Ukraine. It's very simple. No way that any peacekeepers, not talking about any documents signed by, let's say, Putin, like we've seen it with Budapest Memorandum or with any other documents that have been signed by the Russian side over the last 35 years or previously, would lead to any sustainable security guarantees for Ukraine. So this is number one topic and number one issue that everybody must watch very closely.
I'm in complete agreement with you, Andrei. And I think that because Ukraine has been burned before by the Budapest Memorandum, they're not going to get burned again, and they're going to dig in their heels on this. And I think the armament flow from Europe is much stronger than it was. Even if Trump suspended aid, I don't think he would cut off intelligence. And I think it's just in a very a strange and awkward position right now where we're at, moving from talk of a ceasefire to moving to a peace agreement without a ceasefire. So it's, as I begin the podcast, it's very unorthodox in diplomacy, and we're in uncharted waters. But Andrei, it's been a great pleasure having you on this podcast. You're a beloved guest on our show. This has been the Eyes on Eurasia podcast. Our guest has been Andrei Illarionov. Please check out previous interviews Andrei's giving. Andrei, we look forward to having you on the podcast again as we keep watch on this future trilateral summit and the direction of U.S. Russia-Ukraine relations. Andrei, thanks for appearing today.
And it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.